Welcome everybody in the remote property investing community, and when this gets repurposed onto the podcast and YouTube, wherever you're actually going to be watching whenever that comes out. So today I'm joined with Ranjan Bhattacharya. Super honoured to be joined with Ranjan. I've been following Ranjan for a while. We did have a chat last year. I'm not sure if you remember. You're obviously in a networking group. The first time I ever come across you, Ranjan, was at Cyril Thomas's Essex networking community. And I remember I walked into the networking community. I sat down, and you was the first person I sat down in front of. I think it was either my first or second networking event, and I was super nervous. I'd just come through a bit of a wobble and was doubting myself at the time. I was super nervous. I sat down with you, and you was very accommodating. You talked about stuff, and at the time I was trying to do an option agreement on a conversion of upper parts of a social club into a 13-bed HMO. And I remember sitting down, talking to you, showing you it. You was walking through, talking with it, had a good chat. And then when we walked into the room, I see you stand up, and you was a host, and I was like, holy crap. So I was really scared of networking at that time. I was like, crap, if I knew you was a host before I walked in, or you were speaking, sorry, not the host, but you were speaking, I definitely wouldn't have come over and spoke to you so confidently. But that said, you really you spoke to me really welcomingly, and it really gave me a bit of confidence at the time and helped me in my journey of networking. And I remember as well, they got us to all stand up and say what you was up to. It was a baptism of fire at the time. I'd never been to a network event before, and yeah, but that was the first time I've come across you. But Ranjan, if anybody hasn't come across Ranjan, I'm pretty sure most people have in my audience. Ranjan's a property investor, entrepreneur. I remember you saying as well, when Section 24 first came about, you said, we're no longer property investors, we're now in the property business. And at the time, it sounded cool, I must admit, but it didn't fully resonate with me till maybe a few years later when I realised, wow, this is now a business. This is no longer, let's do a little retirement plan. This is for my retirement. I buy a house on the side. You really have got to go at this like a business. So Ranjan's been a property entrepreneur for over 30 years. He's on the hit TV show, the TV Elevator. His YouTube channel's on fire. It's fantastic. I want to ask you a few questions around that. Really, really good. And he's got the UK's largest property meet, so the Baker Street property meet. So Ranjan, I'm going to pass it over to you. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into property and how it all evolved into Baker Street, YouTube, public speaking, and yeah.
How I got into property. It always made sense, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Ever since playing Monopoly as a kid, it made sense. And there was a logic to it. And as soon as I was old enough, I just did it in real life. So I bought my first property pretty much as I graduated from university. I got a job offer with a management consulting firm, and I just took that job offer to a bank, managed to get a mortgage, and pretty much had got a mortgage for a property before I'd started work. And then in the kind of job that I did, you never really, I bought a place in a London suburb, and you never really lived there because you get posted all around the place. So then obviously I rented it out, and all the way through the 1990s, pretty much bought one place every 6 months. And the strategy was single lets. The strategy was to have as much rent roll and cash flow for as few rooftops as possible, because I had a busy job, busy career. And the stuff that you talk about, remote management, that was all very part of it, because I wasn't around. I could only, I was physically not around, because in management consultancy, you're posted somewhere, you're posted on a project, and that project means flying somewhere, and then flying out Monday morning, coming back Friday evening, and you're only physically available over the weekend. So to do things remotely and to get a team in place was absolutely critical. Something that allowed me to get on with my career without having to focus on managing these units. So it was about having a local team, boots on the ground. It was about having as few rooftops as possible, producing the maximum cash flow so that I could get on with the other stuff that I wanted to do. But that's how I got started. And then in pretty much after a decade or so, I enjoyed my job. I wasn't really one of these ones that wanted to get out of the rat race or anything like that. But basically the property started to get in the way of the day job. So eventually I had to quit.
And how was that transition? So many people get caught in that transition from going for, it's a brave thing, isn't it? When you go into entrepreneurship business, you give up that regular knowing you're going to get a regular amount of money each month, month to month, whenever you've got a business. 1 month it could be here, 1 month it could be there. And you have to make peace with that when you actually do that. How hard was it to let go of a good corporate career?
I think mixed. I think it was, it's hard from the point of view that if it's very well paid and there's good prospects and you actually enjoy it,
Yeah.
then it is tough to jack it in. But consequently, what that does to you is it sets your bar really high in property. So if I was not really doing much, or just, I don't know, if I was stacking shelves in Tesco, then if I'm looking for financial freedom, what I have to generate in property isn't a great deal to replace my income. But for me, doing something else to what was a very good career, it had to be very, very good as an alternative for me to do something else. And that's the thing. So what I think it did for me is it set my bar really high in property. My getting out of bed to do a deal had to be really a barnstormer for it to be worth it. And I think that's what having a good career does to you. But long term, it was obvious, because anyone that's worked in management consultancies, global management consultancy, partnership type organization, you're there because one day you aspire to being partner. And when you look around at the partners' lifestyles and stuff, it's not really something that I aspired to do. It was great when you were in your 20s and early 30s, but after that, it's probably not like the right place to be. So it was always, I guess, logical that one day you'd get out. So I enjoyed it while I could, but I tell you, it certainly meant that I did great deals because I had a great day job.
Yeah, it makes sense. Funny enough, I've got the Rich Dad Poor Dad board game, and on there, when you play that, the people that are on the lower jobs are the quickest ones to financial freedom, as you said. So it's quite a blessing sometimes to get somebody with that lower pay and the lower overheads. And yeah, it does make sense. That's what majorly traps people, I find. Thing I forgot to mention at the start as well was, I've got it right in front of me, so I don't know how I forgot to mention it. The Blue Bricks article. What a fantastic article. I've watched the video as well on it. And I'm proud to say, I've joined you in this edition of Blue Bricks.
Yes, you're in there as well.
So we're both side by side in now. It's coincidental. I didn't realise you was in this until it landed on my doorstep, and I'd already asked you to do this. The other little thing I've got to mention is I thought I'd make an effort for you today, Ranjan. I know you're always super dapper, so I usually just wear a sports jumper for these interviews.
Yeah.
Thought, do you know what? I'm going to feel largely underdressed. I know Ranjan's going to come along looking dapper as he always does. So I made a little bit of an effort and put a jacket on. Last time I put a jacket on was when we were actually physically networking. And that leads me into my next part of the questions. So you run Baker Street, a network event, the largest in the UK. Where do you see the future of the networking going with all this Zoom now and everything? Where do you see that going?
It's going to come back. It's going to come back. People are desperate. I can't tell you how many messages we get every week from people saying, when are we restarting Baker Street? And I sometimes wonder, do you guys not watch the news? Don't you know there's a pandemic on? We can't be the restrictions. We can't book a venue and all of this. But people have been asking us every week, even in the height of lockdown. So it's just a recoil spring ready to bounce back into action in terms of the economy, but also in terms of social interaction. Zoom's all very well, but it doesn't replace the face-to-face. Because here's the thing, a lot of networking events have tried to go Zoom, but what happens on a Zoom event is, let's say there are 50 people or 100 people or 200 people there. The interaction is pretty much between one or two people. When you come to a Baker Street or any other networking event, there are literally hundreds of interactions going on at that time. Even if someone's speaking, there is someone having a quick side chat to someone else, or someone's just walked through the door, they're a little bit late, they recognize someone in the fifth row, they're saying hi, they're you get all those side interactions that take place between multiple people. And that doesn't happen over Zoom because it's just one person talking and perhaps a host and one person asking a question at one time. So you miss that.
Yeah, do you think there'll be a hybrid version of this? Do you think people are gonna like? What's your thoughts around going forward with this? Are you gonna interact a Zoom thing, or do like I've spoke to a few hosts and they're kind of saying maybe every other one, or an interact like a TV in the room and blend it? Do you think there's going to be a hybrid version? Are you considering this?
Don't know. I'm not sure whether a blended version will work because I think it detracts from the energy in the room, quite frankly. Yeah. I think it detracts from the energy in the room. I think it's okay to relay the room outside, but then if you start interacting with people, for the people in the room, it detracts from the energy, and then you're at the mercy of tech.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm reading Super Fans, I think it's called, by someone Flynn. But yeah, I'm reading Super Fans at the moment, and he says about it. That's why a concert is so different, isn't it? You go there, you get that energy of that people, that especially that collected group, and yeah, it's never going to be replaced online. I think online does a good job of being able to meet people like this, but yeah, that human beings need interaction, don't they? We need that.
What we will be doing though is we will be jigging the format up a little bit. I mean, pre-COVID, we were pretty much we were the largest networking event in the UK. We were getting anywhere between 250 to 300 people at our meets, which is massive, really. Yep. It's massive. And the format that worked really well for us was the shorter talk. So it was a bit like TED Talks for property. So perhaps 3 speakers, 10 minutes apiece, but little panel discussion and plenty of opportunity to network for people to just network with each other. And I think people like that, because what I found is that you can waffle on with a 45-minute presentation, but you can get some salient points across in 10 minutes. And people love that now. I mean, look at TikTok. People are doing informational stuff in a minute. So 10 minutes is massive. And, speakers are okay with that because, if you were a speaker, if I asked you to come along and speak and I said, look, you've got a 10-minute speaking slot and there are 30 people in the room, you'd probably think, oh, well, is it worth the effort? But if there's 300 people in the room and you've got 10 minutes and then you're on a panel at the end, that's still, you're getting in front of a lot of people.
Absolutely.
So people love that format. It's punchy.
Yeah, and the attention spans of people just reducing, aren't they? So I think that's quite a nice one. It's made, note that the TED Talk of property meetups, that'd be great. So, okay, now I'm going to go a little bit more into property. Last year, I follow your YouTube stuff. Last year, you announced, I can't remember what date it was, you announced that the property market's not going to crash this year. There wasn't one single property investor that was saying it wasn't going to crash. Everybody's doing their predictions, and you jumped out and said it's not going to crash. I must admit, at the time, I followed you, and I was like, ooh, that's a bit bold. Wow, I'm not sure. None of us have got a proper crystal ball.
There were quite a few in the comments.
Yeah, I see the comments on your feed. What was that one guy said? If you're going to bet your financial future on this guy, you deserve to lose your money. But,
I love leaving that. We just leave those comments up because it gives people something to read while they're watching the video.
But yeah, but that said, it's only views, isn't it? We can only give our views and opinions. I remember at the time, so it's my view, but it's not going to crash next year. The quantity of easing levels, what's going into the economy at the moment, is absolutely ginormous. I don't think so many people pay so much attention to that. But I was still like, wow, I get where you was coming from when you said it. But the big unknown at the moment is, when's this quantity of easing going to stop? None of us know when it's going to stop, because none of us know when we're fully going to get on top of this COVID virus. Like, obviously, we're rolling out the vaccines at the moment, but Europe's not as up to date as we are. We don't know what's happening around the world. We don't know if there's going to be a new variant. So until we really know an end date of that, we don't know when the government are going to stop printing money. And I can't see them presses stop rolling until there is an end date and we're coming some way out of the woods, or at least businesses can stand up and open and operate, So I must admit,
that's very true. But just with what's already happened, that hasn't fed through the system yet. In terms of inflation of asset prices, that's the issue. Yes, there may be more, but what there has been hasn't fed through the system yet.
That's tons, isn't it? And the big difference at the moment is as well is the fact it's going into people's pockets. The last few quantitative easings went all into like government-backed bonds got bought, and it went into the corporations, and it went into a higher level. This is now coming into sort of grassroots level. I'm going to see if I can share the screen. I'm not sure if I can do this on a live Zoom, but this is what I hear you talk about this a lot. And I think so many people are missing the point. They're saying property prices are going up, but it's the asset price is going up, but the value of your pound is going down. And this is, I'll see if I can share this. Not sure if this is going to work.
No, you're right. People need to understand the difference between value and currency and price. They're completely different things.
Absolutely.
Oh, what you got here? This is interesting.
You see that? Yeah. So this is the dollar. This is the dollar price. This is the dollar price at the moment. So in 1913, $100 was worth $100. It was just about to take over the UK as the world leading currency reserve currency, which had done. I think it was in 1945. Yeah, the Bretton Woods Agreement. They took over as the world leading reserve currency from the pound. When you look over history of this, the pound had it for about 75 years to 100 years. Then it was the guilder before that. They was the world leaders, the Dutch, because they went and made the boats and conquered the world because the ship making technology was at front. England watched them, modelled them, and then we was the industrial revolutionary leaders because we created the combustion engine and the trains and all that stuff. Then America overtook us around this point. We got into wars. We were trying to hold on what we was doing. But this is where it is at. This is what $100 was worth, $100 then. And this is 2019. This is not even now as well. So you can see the decline of what the buying power of this over the time. And here you can see Trump putting in taxes, quantitative easing again. So where's this going to go? What's your views? There's loads of talk about a money reset. There's loads of talk about China. It looks like if you look at these long-term cycles, I thought of Ray Dalio. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but when you look at these long-term debt cycles, it looks like China is in the place where America was when England was at World War II at them times. And it looks like it's a trade. There's not obviously major war, but it's like a trade war going on. Well, there is a trade war going on, a currency war going on. And it looks like China might emerge as the new world leading currency and maybe as a digital one. They've got that new digital one, whatever, however you pronounce that. So what's your views around that? Do you think they're going to overtake that?
It's scary times. It's scary times because you know, they've printed so much new currency. $1 in $5 ever printed was printed last year. UK is not far behind. The colossal amount of money printing. What that means is, if you have more of something, then it is worth less, and therefore the price of things go up just to preserve their value before the money printing went on. So when we see price rises in property, if you actually look at it, I mean, if you actually think about it, if you buy a £500,000 property, you will save £15,000 in stamp duty because of the stamp duty holiday. But when you actually look at many £500,000 properties, they've risen by more than £15,000 in value over this period. So to explain that these prices have gone up because, oh, stamp duty, you know, stamp duty holiday is ludicrous. So what else is explaining this? Well, what's explaining it is that property is finite in the UK. We need 300,000 homes every year. We're not building anywhere near that number. The requirements for housing is just going up and up and up in the UK. So housing is a finite commodity, and the price of those is going up because the price is basically paid for out of currency, and because they've printed more currency, in order for the value of the property to stay the same, the price will go up. If you know, a brand new Ferrari costs 250 grand, they make 1,000 of them a year. If you give everyone 250,000, then more people will be able to afford to buy Ferraris. So therefore, the price of those Ferraris will go up to reflect that supply-demand imbalance. It's logic. It happens all the time.
Absolutely. And this will happen between, like, we had some crazy years with the banks, like just pushing money out the door, irresponsibly lending. And that's exactly what happened with asset prices. When that money was just getting pushed out the door, remember, like in the noughties, you could go and get remember, you could sit in front of a mortgage broker and just say to them, look, I want to buy this asset. How much you want a year? 30 grand. What we'll do is we'll put you on 80 grand a year. We'll just push that through. There was no checks to see if you earned that. And we'll lend you 30% of the property value. If you're a homeowner or if you're an investor, we'll do your back-to-back loan so you can get every single penny out day one. You've got no skin in the game. So, yeah, when you do push that liquidity into the market, into the pockets of people, obviously it has an effect. But obviously now with this printing, I'm with you. I think it's scary time. I'm not sure.
But for property people, it's scary time if you do not have a strategy for dealing with this. So, I don't have a clue whether there's going to be a reset and digital currency and all of this sort of stuff. But what I do know is there's going to be rampant asset inflation. And if you've got money in the bank, the value of that money is going down while we speak.
Yeah.
So the question is, what's your strategy to hedge against that? And if you do property, it's fantastic, because particularly when it's leveraged, you buy a property today and you lock the value of the debt into today's money. So even with a little bit of inflation in a few years' time, the value of the debt is set at today's money, so you benefit that way. And the price, of course, gets inflated upwards. Now, the time, I think the big time this happened in spades was in the very early 70s. Now, obviously, I wasn't investing at that time. I've just read it in history books. But in 1977, between 1970 and 72, the US had come off the gold standard, and there'd been an oil price shock where oil was basically doubled in value. OPEC was born and all of that. And they restricted supply, price went up. And of course, the world was far more dependent on oil back then, particularly Middle Eastern oil, than today. And what that meant was that in the very early 70s, there was massive inflation. And what we saw in the UK between 1971 and 1972 was a more than doubling of house prices. So if you actually got into the property market in 1970, you would have more than doubled on practically anything you'd bought in just a couple of years. Now, the reason I know about this, because I know my dad was studying at the time. He was doing a postgraduate degree, and he had graduated just after the prices had literally more than doubled in 18 months. So when they had to buy a house, they were just at the wrong end of it. And many of his friends had just bought 18 months before and were in a completely different situation. Now, that was, I think, in our living memories, the most extreme effect of this asset price inflation that we've ever had. Now, remember, what that means is, it doesn't mean that the value of the property is going up or has changed. What it means is you're being robbed of your currency that you have in the bank. And you have to put it in something to kind of preserve the value of that currency. So if you're sitting on a, people talk about, no money down and what to do with, no money and all the rest of it. But the biggest problem facing property investors or anyone is if they have got some money in the bank. What are you going to do to make sure that money stays worth the same as it is today in 1 or 2 years' time? And a great strategy, which is what we are seeing in spades right now, is people buying property. They're buying it leveraged so that they lock in at today's value of debt, benefit from the entire value of the property, and that is their hedge instead of putting money in the bank for the couple of years ahead. The other issue, of course, is what can happen to the banking system. I don't think people realize this, but there's some important changes that happened to the banking system after 2009. And I don't want to sound like a sort of, tinfoil hat guy with and keeping loads of tins of beans and loo rolls in my basement in case there's some kind of Armageddon situation. But what happened after 2009, the banks had a massive liquidity issue, and the government bailed them out. They then, in round about 2012-ish, they changed a lot of the banking laws. And the effect of these changes are that the banks can do bail-ins. Now, if you put money in your bank, we still think that the bank has your money on deposit. It is not true. You're actually loaning your money to the bank, and you get an interest rate which is close to zero in exchange. Right? You get a guarantee that you'll get the first 85k back under the government's protection scheme, but it is a loan to the bank. And if the bank wants to default on that loan, then that is a bail-in. Has this happened? Yes. After these laws were brought in, it happened in Cyprus. They went through a massive crisis, and anyone, basically, they did a haircut on everyone's bank balances, taking 10%.
Yeah, and I opened up a bank account maybe about 2 years ago with Lloyd's, and I opened a few accounts at the similar time because I was setting up a group structure, and they really hammered home that £85, like 85 grand, like limit what is protected. I mean, hammered it home, like really made it clear. We only insure up to this amount, and they said it loads of times. I was thinking, wow, what do you know that I don't know that you really, really want to make that so clear to me when I'm opening up the bank with you?
It is exceptionally scary. And of course, if you buy a property, I don't see how they can take a haircut of 10% of that property. What are they going to do? Hive off the lounge?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, okay, let's lead into property. So the exciting type property is definitely asset class. I feel, what's your thoughts around a little bit, because people are realizing this, there's so much information now, there's an abundance of information. So like in one degree, we've got landlords exiting the markets, especially mature landlords that don't want to re-educate yourself. But on the other hand, we're getting loads of entry people into the market that are educating themselves because there's so many more education platforms and awareness today. So a lot of people, I feel, are trying to get their money out of the banks at the moment and get them into asset classes, which is, as we talked about, property. But where do you see, for me, I remote invest, we talked about this before we got on, and I do like single lets, but it is increasingly getting harder to find them single lets that you can force the appreciation up enough. Like I call them KISS refurbs, keep it simple, stupid refurbs, especially if you're going to do it remotely. You don't want to be, ideally, everybody's different, but in an ideal world, you don't want to really be taking on 180, 200k refurbs remotely with new builders you've never met before in a location that you're not around. So I say keep it simple on the small ones, like cut your teeth, build up a bit by bit. But it's increasingly harder on them smaller assets to find stuff that you can reinvent to push the appreciation up. And I remember I said at the network events before, when I heard you speak years ago, and you said it's not the price of what you buy the asset for is not the important thing. It's what you can do with the asset. So sometimes you can just pay more on it. If your plan for that and your vision for that is better than anybody else's, and you can repurpose that in the correct way, that ultimately puts you in a different position, and price is not the competing factor then. And I really got that straight away. So I was like, oh wow, because so many people, they say the asking price is £1 million, they want to get it for 999, just the fact that they've haggled a little bit off, and they miss the fact that forget what you're paying for it, just look what you can get purpose from that with that, So obviously it is exciting times with commercial conversions, but obviously the bigger the risk, the bigger the reward as well. So I heard you saying as well, I think early adopters are definitely going to benefit from this, but educate people. I think like you can come unstuck quickly. My relationship manager in Lloyd's, I sent her a deal about a year and a half ago, and they had a great appetite for it just before that. And she said, no. And I went, what do you mean no? Like, what's the matter? Like, I'll get on with her as well. She's like, no, it's not got the same appetite. We've been burnt on so many of these deals at the moment that we've called in our appetite a little bit. Obviously, Lloyd's are very different on the relationship managers you work with. But yeah, it's a big win on a potential big loss. But either way, let's concentrate on the win side of things. And where do you see the opportunity in this? How would you go about looking for, say you're just coming in. My first commercial conversion I've done was off the back of following you, and that inspired me. So say you're at the beginning stage, you're graduating yourself up, you've done a few little refurbs, now you want to go to that next step. What would you be looking for? How would you be looking for them? How do you identify the difference between what's good and what's not?
Oh, great question. I think the start small, prove the concept. Commercial property is a very, very interesting space because What it does is it allows you the opportunity to beat the market. What the difference between speculation and people that know what they're doing is people that have a strategy to beat the market, because you can buy a property, like you buy a new build apartment. If you sit on it for 10 years, it will probably go up over that time, but you've done nothing to engineer that price rise. You're riding the market, good or bad. What we're talking about is where you can beat the market. So you get an appreciation in the here and now based on what you do. So you can do that either by buying well below market value and all of that, or by adding value to the property. And the commercial property thing is in my view, the easiest, no, not in my view, it just is. It's the easiest way to add value in the here and now, right now. And the reason is that commercial property is in abundance, it's in oversupply, and per square foot is cheap. And the other thing is the government have introduced so many permitted development rights to allow those to be repurposed to residential use. And in most areas, the value of residential property per square foot is double or treble the value of commercial property per square foot. The other issue is this: the way commercial property is valued is completely different to residential. So if you've got an empty 2-bedroom flat, that the value of that 2-bedroom flat is worth the same as one that's occupied. If it's tenanted, it doesn't matter whether an Uber driver is tenanting that property, someone unemployed is tenanting that property, or a surgeon is tenanting that property. The value of that 2-bedroom flat in Romford is the same. It's unaffected. Now, commercial property is completely different. If it's empty, it has a different valuation to whether it's full. And if it's full, who is it full with? How long is the lease? What is the strength of that tenant? This all affects the value of that particular property. Now, the cheapest commercial property is the one that's empty. Residential property is not valued like that, because residential values are bricks and mortar. Commercial is about the cash flow, the strength of the tenant, the length of the lease, and generally the covenant. So there is a massive discrepancy in which can be exploited in the way commercial properties and residential property is valued. So simply by taking commercial property and making it into residential, you have an immediate uplift. Now the issue is what sort of properties are you buying, and how much does it cost to convert from commercial to residential? And as long as it's much less than the differential, you've made a healthy margin.
Yeah,
and what's driving that now is the abundance and oversupply of these units, and the fact that there are more permitted development rights than ever before to allow these to be changed without planning permission. And I started doing this in 2005, and I had to do it through full planning. My first commercial to residential was a retail to residential conversion under full planning permission. Pain in the neck. Got it, but pain in the neck. In 2013, it became permitted development, and there are even more permitted development rules coming over the coming months.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I know that for the commercial conversion. The commercial conversion I've done, I was a tenant of that. So I repurposed the building, made 2 apartments out of it. Shops and uppers, what you talk about, and the shop I kept, and exactly that. They give me an empty value, an empty building value revaluation on that, because I was a tenant, and they said, look, you're not, because I bought in an SPV. I then rented it to another, so I bought it with a JV partner and an SPV. Then I rented it to my other management company over here. It was nothing to do with him. They said, you're not a strong enough tenant. So they just give me a complete straightforward empty rate revaluation. And yeah, that was it. It was just no sort of arguing. It was just, that's what it is. You're not a good enough tenant. So it does massively depend. But where do you think the exciting times are, Randy? Do you think people are going to be able to convert these buildings quick enough to have an impact like as you said, there's a massive supply and demand problem with Harvey property. Do you think that this is going to balance that supply and demand out? Or do you think we couldn't develop them quick enough? Do you think this permitted development is really going to help push that on forward? Or what's your views around that?
It's bound to help with supply. Anything we can do to increase supply is better.
Yeah.
the planning system doesn't work. There are some reforms planned to planning, but we'll wait and see what those entail. But it takes a long time to get decent schemes through the planning process. PD is a way of saying, here are buildings that already exist. As long as you don't change the outside envelope of the property, what's the big deal in converting the inside into whatever you want with light touch rules? That's really what permitted development is all about.
Yeah, well, I heard you talking about one of the things. I'm not an expert on this as well, by no means, so excuse any really naive questions. But you're saying about with this permitted development, it's E-class. The councils still, though, got a right to have a view on this. Is that correct? They can still pose a view on this with the permitted development?
Not with what's coming.
Right,
the stuff you're talking about is to do with the building additional floors on properties. So there you're changing the external appearance of the property. But generally speaking, where you're not changing the external appearance, it's just internal conversion, then you're good to go. It's pretty straightforward tick list. Now, when let's say you're doing an office to residential conversion, under the permitted development system, you'd apply for the change of use to 7, 8 flats or whatever it is that you want to do. And then if you wanted to punch in some extra windows later on or change the external appearance, that would be subject to a full planning application.
right, okay.
Often those aren't, and as long as they're sensible, they shouldn't be refused. The main prize is getting the change of use.
As I say, would you do it that way round? So get the change of use and then go back afterwards to try and do the windows and the external stuff?
Well, it depends, because what they've done recently is they've said that when you go for a permitted development, you've got to demonstrate that with the existing windows and doors in situ, that every habitable room has natural light. So to do that, you either have to do a planning application to punch in the windows and doors first and then do the prior approval, or do it the other way around if you can show habitable rooms have natural light, if that makes sense.
Right, okay. Yeah, that does make sense. So with the shops and tops, I noticed you done a video the other day and you showed a high street. What do you think the opportunity is in the high street? What would your repurposing, like the few examples you showed was like, I think it was a Clark's shoe store. So with them style ones, what would be your plan for the bottom part of that building, like the retail section of them? Is there a massive opportunity in them, or was you just using that for the access thing? And would you mainly go for secondary parades that you could get full sort of residential out of, or is there?
The thing is, in primary and secondary parades, you're unlikely to make them fully residential.
Okay.
And it's only where, you get these places in the middle of nowhere where they're just 2 or 3 shops and that's it, and it's the middle of a residential area. Those sort of ones, you'll probably get permission. But where there's a established parade, it's unlikely.
Yep.
The thing is, this is one of the mistakes I think many residential investors make, because they come from a residential point of view and they think, let's convert it all into residential.
Yep.
But on an established parade, as long as it's a prosperous area, it's not Blackpool or somewhere like that. As long as it's a relatively prosperous area. By prosperity, I mean my rule of thumb is national average house price is 250K. So as long as you're within spitting distance of 250K average house price in the vicinity of your parader shops, there should be decent demand for the unit that you make. So what we tend to do is we make the rear of the shop into a separate flat, and we keep a much smaller shop at the front. Now, what tends to happen is, like with that Clark's example, for example, that shop was built for selling product off shelves. Now that's all done on internet nowadays. So the shops that seem to want to open up tend to be more service sector shops, and they don't need to be so deep. They don't need so much storage. So what tends to happen is that when you make the rear into a flat and you have a smaller shop at the front, there are plenty of people that want that smaller shop for a service sector business. And the great thing about those businesses, those units is that when you have a smaller shop, they're often business rates exempt. So we try to size these smaller shops so that they're below the business rates threshold. So if it's your first business, you just come in, pay the rent, no business rates, start trading. And there's plenty of demand for that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it makes sense. Because again, in my initial mind wandered towards, wow, you must have been pleased if you had clerks in there as a tenant, and losing them, maybe was your worry. But yeah, it makes sense to make them into a smaller sort of space. So yeah, excellent. My next thing is around your YouTube. I'm really admirer of your YouTube. I love your humour in there. I love your humour in general. So what sort of input have you had in building your YouTube, like the editing and the like you get the little bits in there? It sings your humour all day long, but is that just, do you pass it to somebody? Do they take that over? Or are you involved with the editing side of that? Like, well, just telling them what to edit. How have you built that out? And how long does it take to build it out to where it is?
Well, I've got a great team here, and I've got a guy that basically manages our YouTube channel and all our video content, because we do some video courses and things in commercial property as well. So we edit all of those materials, and we have private members groups. So there's videos that you see on YouTube, but there's also videos for our various commercial property investing communities as well. So we basically have a team here that just does all that. So because I have a lot of stuff to do, obviously, in property and all the rest of it. So my thing is pretty much to have the idea of what I want to talk about. We got a little studio here, which is next door to my office. Everything's all set up, ready to go, and just come in here and shoot, and then it kind of gets edited. And I think the important thing is, I think we have a house style for the kind of show formats that we do, and just try to make them a bit fun, really.
Yeah, they are fun.
Throw in a little bit of bits and pieces here and there to surprise people.
Yeah, really good. It's getting great momentum, and it's
pretty much been in the last year. I mean, I think some of the videos we've put out seem to get some traction, seem to get some interaction, seem to get some likes, and that all helps with the YouTube algorithm. But I think it's about trying to. I think with YouTube, what it's been about for me is you got to know what people want to hear, and I think running the networking event, the Baker Street, kind of put me in touch with 250, 300 people every month. So in terms of knowing what people want to hear and what people resonate with and the common questions people are asking, you kind of have a feel. And as long as you can answer those questions and you put that out in an educative and entertaining way, then obviously people will watch it. And I think that's really it. I think I just try to keep my ear to the ground to figure out what questions people are asking and just answer them.
Absolutely. It's important to be consistent and try to put out some value. So noisy. It is a good platform now. Like, obviously, social media, and I'm going to go on to that now as well. So social media is such a powerful platform for businesses today. Very different. Like when you said you were doing stuff remotely because of your corporate career, very differently to today. This is why I say to people, the remote investing element has definitely opened up in a different way than it has ever, because businesses are largely your network. Your network's your net worth. This is a cliche saying, and it's a bit cheesy, but it's so true. Networking is rapidly fast forwarded today in today's world because of social media. People build know, like, and trustability from touch points, and I'll trust you already. I've never actually, apart from once when I first met you, sat down and spoke to you face to face, just watching your videos, I feel a trust in your authority, your knowledge from watching them videos. So this makes it a complete game changer. But what I see people fall short on often with social media is they think it's just, I'm going to open a YouTube channel, or I'm going to open a Facebook page or an Instagram thing. They expect the businesses are going to flood towards them. Maybe when it was in its early days, you could just open one up and you just had to turn up and you got thousands of likes and viral views. Very similar to property. Back in the day when it was growing ridiculously high, all you had to do is turn up and you thought you was an investor because your property price went up. But when it gets mature, and the internet's getting a lot more mature now, it means you have to do a good job to stand out from the crowd really with it. Otherwise, you're just going to get lost in all the noise. And I feel, or you've got to stay consistent as well. So many people get disheartened that they only get 2 likes, and it's like, well, stick at it for a little while. It will build up. But one of my questions around this and social media is, what importance do you place on that in business today? And I asked Tej this for the first time. I interviewed Tej, and obviously he's massive on his branding stuff. If we said today, okay, there's a reset today, we all talked about this big grand reset. So there's a reset today. You've got no knowledge back from what you've done over years. You're not going back in time either. So you're at your age now. So for me, time is our biggest asset. I think people underutilize how they spend their time. So today you can either keep the wealth that you've accumulated, but without the knowledge and without the network, and without your social media presence and your brand now, or you can keep your brand and your network, but from today's point, without the time going backwards. But you've got to learn everything again. What would you keep?
I don't know. I think there's pros and cons of that.
Absolutely.
I think I think the brand and the network is always something you can do something with.
Yeah.
And make work. But likewise, it's something you should be able to build again as well.
Yeah. Both ways you can build both again. I guess the question is, where do you think the accelerated growth would come from? Having a pot of money, no network, no knowledge.
Oh, that's easy. Yeah. I mean, everything that I have done, and pretty much in the last more than a decade, has really been because of contacts that I've met through putting myself out there. So this is what I say to everyone, really. If you're just getting on with your property investing and you don't let people know what you do, then you will miss out on so many opportunities. So people that I work with nowadays in all aspects of my business often have come to me from social media, or I've done a talk. When I used to do talks at various networking events, I mean, all the private investors, I don't do so much work with private investors now, but all the private investors that have invested in my projects, they came to me from being in the audience of talks that I've done. So you're not asking for it. It's not a pitch. You're just saying, look, this is what we do in property.
Yeah.
And people come up to you at the end with their card, and you go for coffee and that kind of thing. So, deals, people that I'm working with, experts, professionals, professional advisors, so many come from introductions that I have simply because from putting myself out there. It's absolutely essential to everybody.
And it's a bugbear of mine when people will say, especially when they're starting out, and you get some people say, find the deal and the money will come. And I say, kind of, but people got to know what you're doing. Nobody's going to knock on your door and say, I've just got an inkling that just got into property and you've got a fantastic deal. I've got some money for you. You've got to let people know what you're doing. And otherwise, no money's going to come, no matter how good the deal is, if nobody knows about it. So it's got a kind of bit of truth to it. But I think so many people come unstuck when they come to these deal packaging courses, and they're going to see agents bidding on stuff, and then they think, oh, where'd I get the investor? I thought they're just going to turn up. But yeah, it is an interesting one. So this is a very different question. Well, no, before I quickly go on to these last couple of questions, the TV, that really segued that nice for me, because you said you used to raise investment. Now you're an angel investor. So how did that come about? Did that come about from your profile? How are you enjoying being on that panel of investors? The show is fantastic. So yeah, has that transition gone from you actually taking money from investors to being an angel investor?
Oh, it's great fun. I mean, John Howard, who's the co-producer of that show, is one of the angels on the show. I met him at a networking event. We were both speaking there, and I met him for the first time, and we kind of gelled, had a bit of a chat, and this was an idea that he was working with at the time, and I just thought it'd be just great to be involved. It's just great to be involved, and it's incredible fun. It really does keep you on your toes, because the other angels are very sharp cookies, and you got to be quick. And it is, someone comes into the studio, we don't know who's coming in. We don't know anything about that deal. Normally people come in, they give us a little handout about 5 minutes beforehand with the basics of the deal and some numbers and that kind of stuff. And then they walk in and do their pitch. Um, and it is strange. It is a little bit of a strange investing process, because normally in the real world you do it in a different way. You get to know someone, you get to trust someone, you get to like someone, and then you have the deal.
Yeah.
So this is turned around on its head. You get a piece of paper 5 minutes before with the basic elements of the deal, and then they come in. It's all deal, deal, deal. You got no idea, no trust, like you're basically assessing the deal. So it turns on its head the normal way that you would invest in someone's project.
Yeah, well, it's made me think you maybe should do one of the shows like The Voice and actually be facing away from them, and you just look at the deals and then judge them on there and press the button and turn around. But that
But
said,
it's amazing how people present themselves. I mean, there's so many. We've got all the on my YouTube. I've done we've split up all the pictures from the last series, and I've done a bit of a sort of reaction video to them, where I've stopped the video and done a bit of analysis and gave my reaction and thoughts on what was going on. So those are well worth watching. They're entertaining, they're educational, and all of that sort of stuff. But so many times people come on and they have got a duff deal, quite frankly, but the investor displays just in those 10 minutes or so that they are clued up and they are investable. They've just picked the wrong deal to go for. And then time and time it's said that, look, you're backable, we'd love to work with you and all of that, but this is not the right project. There just isn't enough in it. And sometimes it's okay for them to do on their own, but it's just not enough in it to share and do in a JV way. But Series 3 is going to be filming in July. And I've made it as an angel investor on Series 3. They haven't axed me. So we'll be filming a whole bunch of episodes, and that'll be back on the telly in September.
But this is the key question as well. How much do you pay attention to the person over the deal, or vice versa?
More so.
The person.
Yeah. There's got to be someone you can work with. You've got to be able to judge some values and see whether there's an alignment there, and some common ground. And then, of course, you do the deal, and obviously, deals that are done on the telly, they're all subject to a little bit of due diligence, because sometimes you've then got to do the due diligence afterwards, and as long as everything checks out, things progress.
Do you check out their profiles after? You see if they are online afterwards, and have a little check out of that? Who's the lady on there with you? I've forgotten her name now. Helen, yeah, I was speaking to her on a Clubhouse, and I asked her this very similar question. She said, look, it's massive looking at people's profiles. She went, but I do invest with somebody that hasn't got a profile, but obviously does have a big influence of it. Do you go off when you afterwards? Does everybody have a little look to see if they've got a profile and online presence?
Yes, I mean, of course, you do a little bit of digging.
Yeah.
And I think what's happening now is that people do come on the show and they kind of target certain angels for investment in projects. And a lot of people come on, they've seen my YouTube, they know the sort of projects I like to get involved in, so they come and kind of pitch those projects, hoping that I want to get involved. So it's great fun. It's great fun. It's great involvement, and deals have been done out of it.
Fantastic.
Real deals have been done out of it, and it's been good. And there's been some cracking ideas from Series 2. If anyone wants any ideas of what sort of property projects that work, you only have to, because you're a fly in the wall. When you watch that show, you're a fly on the wall of a bit of a unique situation. Someone is actually pitching a real property project, and there are a whole bunch of people who either are going to offer them funding for that project or not. And why is it a goer and why is it not a goer? You learn so much from that to feed into your own game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hopefully it's entertaining as well. There's a bit of banter among us. So,
Yeah, no, I'm enjoying it. I enjoy the little clips you do of it afterwards as well, like when you stop it and give the feedback reviews. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the next one. So the final little couple of questions. One book that you've read, give me one book recommendation that you've read that's not directly property related, but it's had a big impact on your property and entrepreneurial journey.
Oh, really? I think the earlier on, I think it was the E-Myth. I've forgotten who wrote that now.
Yeah,
The E-Myth
Michael
books.
Gerber.
Yeah. Those were really powerful.
Yeah.
And I loved a book, another book I read, which it's just the way he ran his business. It was called Richer Sounds, and it's by the guy who runs the Richer Sounds chain of hi-fi shops.
Mhm.
Um, I've forgotten his first name now, but his surname is Richer, funnily enough. You know the shops I mean, yeah? They
Yeah, I
sell
don't
the
know. Yeah,
hi-fi TVs and all of that. And just the way he runs his business and the way he, with staff motivation and all the rest of it and a greater purpose, it's quite inspirational.
yeah, I've not come across that one. I'm gonna look that up. So the final question is: in first word that comes to your mind, describe what you want from life.
Oh, happiness.
Absolutely. So I've got this little quest where it's like a little side mission that I'd like to get a bit more momentum, but I'd like people to be a bit more aware of it. And I call it figuring out happy. Happy is a lifelong quest. What made you happy, what makes you happy today is very different than to a year ago or 2 years ago, or when you didn't have kids and you have kids, you got older kids, or when your body is in a different shape and you have to exercise different if you exercise. So it's a lifelong quest to be always figuring out what brings you back to that equilibrium. But everybody, whatever they're in pursuit of, is to get that happiness. And happiness, when you look at it on a scientific level, is just an emotional response in our brains, the chemicals that get released: oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, and endorphins. It's just this release. So if you study it now, if you study like this positive psychology, I don't believe in positive psychology as in like just say I'm happy, and everything's gonna be golden. You've got to be realistic. But if you understand, if you study the psychology behind it, there is a methodology behind bringing yourself back to that equilibrium of happy, because you're going to have down days, you're going to have up days, and it's all about bringing yourself back to that equilibrium. And I feel they've without question studied, when you're in the right positive mind frame, challenges, problems, careers, everything in your life improves, So, it's like when you've got tons of challenges and you're feeling stressed, the littlest thing can feel like a disaster and you just can't figure it out. But when you're in a good mood, these things happen, you just bounce it off. And it increases your career options, your business options, the way you look at deals, everything, it increases. So this is my mission. I think figuring out happy, everybody should be aware of what brings them back to that equilibrium and studying it. If you study that first, then that should be what they should be teaching people at school. Because I don't know one person that don't want some form of happiness. I've asked hundreds of people this question now, and they answer something in a line with happiness. And I've looked up all the meanings of happiness
Okay.
in Google. If it's not happiness directly, it's fulfillment or something that leads to it. So yeah, I think awareness is key in life, and I want to make more people aware of thinking of studying that. So it's my final little question.
You've heard
Ranjan,
the old saying about money.
the whole saying about money. Go on.
The old saying about money. Money doesn't buy you happiness, but at least you can be miserable in comfort.
Absolutely. Listen, but everybody wants to try it out, though, don't they? Everybody wants to like figure out whether it does or it don't. Without question, money does buy you freedom and options, and exactly that. If I'm in a bad mood, I'd rather be in a bad mood with money in my pocket than be in a bad mood with no money in my pocket. At least I can jump on a plane and try and cheer myself up, maybe. But yeah, it's not the answer to things, but it definitely buys you choices and.
No, you're right. I mean, I think the thing with property is that it gets you to a level of financial freedom so that your essentials are covered. And then, because a lot of people are in a pursuit of just covering the essentials of life. And that's tough to balance happiness with that pursuit at the same time. Because often in that pursuit to cover the essentials, you're doing things that don't make you that happy.
Yeah.
Property gives you the ability to cover those essentials. So then, I mean, why are you, doing all these Facebook lives and all of that. I mean, I'm sure it's not to put food on the table. It may lead to something like that, but it is you have the option to pursue happiness above other things. And I think when you do pursue happiness, and it is something that you're passionate about, and something where you can add value to other folks, then everything else just falls into place.
Absolutely, and this, my why in life is living on my terms, and exactly that. I say it is challenging, but to have that choice, happiness is a combination. Because as you said, some people in the pursuit of the money give up their relationships, give up their time, and give up their health. And you've got to get that. You're never going to get it perfect all the time. That's why I say it's awareness. Like, there's always a little tweak that you've got to be aware and bring yourself back to equilibrium. But yeah, getting your relationships right, getting your health right, and your well-being and your mindset right, and your money mixed into it. Money's definitely an important part of it. You've got to be financially secure in life, I believe. There's different levels of financial freedom. I think there's financial security, financial independence, and financial freedom. Financial freedom for me is, and I heard Tony Robbins say this, so I'll give credit in case I'm trying to make out I've made it up. But he said financial freedom is when you can buy a jet tomorrow, you can get a helicopter. You never have to worry about money. So that's true freedom. He said financial independence is when you've got an abundance of money and you've got time on your side. But everybody should at least go for financial security. So even if you do like your job and you want to work, still have some sort of level of security of assets and stuff coming in, so your bills and things are paid for. And depending, obviously, if you want the complete freedom, it comes with a trade-off. It does come with a trade-off of responsibilities and everything else. But yeah, I always found that interesting. But love your views there on that, Ranjan. I've really enjoyed this. Where can people find you? Where can we get on your training courses for this? It is a great opportunity time for this. So where's the best place to sign up with you or look at more what you do?
Well, hit up our website, succeedinproperty.com. Go on YouTube. There's plenty there, which is Succeed in Property. And also I do some free training to get people started in commercial property. And people can get access to that. It's 90 minutes of free training. It tells you what to look for, why there is such an opportunity, and gives you some case studies as well. And that people can sign up for at property-workshop.com. Fantastic.
Thank you very much for your time today, Ranjan, and have a fantastic day and stay happy. Stay
definitely so. Well, the weather's looking good, so that's always a good start.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ranjan. It's gonna cut off now because I don't know how to end it without cutting it off completely because my tech skills ain't there. So I will catch up with you.
No problem.
Cheers, Ranjan.